Hello, and welcome back once again to Better Leader, Richer Life. This is week 5 of our course. And let me offer my congratulations to you for getting this far. For you have now completed or are in the process of completing what most people find to be the most challenging and ultimately perhaps the most important aspect of our course, the stakeholder dialogues. This week, we end our focus on the second principle, being whole, and we moved to the third principle, being innovative, including the fun, creative part, designing experiments. After having explored what it means for you to act with authenticity by clarifying what's important in your life at the start of our course, over the past few weeks, you've thought about who matters most to you, and through reflection and conversation, you're now verifying and perhaps changing how you see each other. You're deepening your understanding of what you need from each other and seeing more clearly how the people and groups in different parts of your life affect each other and you. Following your completion of the assignment from last week, you should now be in the midst of your stakeholder dialogues, taking notes and drawing insights for action from what you discover in them. This week's assignment asks you to do just that, to write about what you discover from your dialogues, to analyze the results, and generate ideas for experiments you might try. And you had another opportunity to provide coaching and feedback to your classmates. I hope it was useful for you to comment on what they wrote about their stakeholders in Assignment 3, and that this helped you to think about your own reactions and responses to that assignment. This week, you'll be asked to comment on what your classmates wrote in Assignment 4 about their preparation for their dialogues. Please keep in mind, the goal is to be compassionate and inquiring about what strikes your curiosity as you read and as you write your observations and questions to them. Try to be as helpful as you can. And this week, you'll read what your classmates said about your third assignment. Let me remind you again that when you're reading what they wrote to you, try to remain as open as you can to this feedback and to think about what you can learn from your classmates about your analysis of your stakeholders. Do your best to see their comments as a resource for you, even if you disagree with them. Most people find that it takes conscious effort and not a little bit of courage to see things from another person's point of view. Once again, I hope you see this as an opportunity to practice this skill of perspective taking as you digest the feedback from your peer coaches. It's useful to not deny any feelings that you might have about the feedback that you receive, but to try to understand your reactions and remain curious, both about what they've said and what you can learn from it. Please raise your questions about the assignments, the peer feedback, or other aspects of our course in our forums, in the FAQs, in meetups, or any other channels that are available to you. In this 5th week of our course, there are 3 parts to the lecture, starting with this one. My goal this week is first to help you learn from your dialogues. Then, after I introduce the third principle, being innovative, I'll teach you about the 9 different kinds of total leadership experiments. Finally, I'll offer some guidance on how to generate an initial list of ideas for a real-world experiment that you'll design to pursue a 4-way win. Next week, we'll go into the details, firming up your specific game plan and scorecard for your experiment. Now, I know that it can be hard to find the time, but please do try your best to complete dialogues with at least 2 stakeholders for each domain. That'll be 6 altogether. So you get the benefit of seeing things from the point of view of people in each part of your life. By the end of it, you should know more about how to derive insights for action from your stakeholder dialogues and how to use what you've been learning these past few weeks to generate practical ideas for your own 4-way wins. Experiments about which you're excited because you're designing them to make things better in all the parts of your life. To be a better leader and have a richer life, you have to apply the knowledge you gain from clarifying what's most important to you and from respecting the most important people in your life to try new ways of getting things done that are good for you and for your people. Okay, so now you're wrapping up your stakeholder dialogues. How does it feel? If you're like most others who've undertaken the challenge of having these conversations, you probably feel some combination of relief and satisfaction. And I hope some new motivation to try creative ways to pursue four-way wins through your experiments. If you feel a sense of accomplishment, well, that's well-deserved. You've just completed the most anxiety-provoking part of our course, and you're halfway through to the finish. You're ready to embark on designing and then implementing experiments. You're probably still in the process of completing your stakeholder dialogues this week. Indeed, it's useful to think about doing these dialogues as an ongoing process. This is especially true for stakeholder dialogues with immediate family members. And you may not have been able to speak with everyone you wanted to, and of course, you can continue to do so for the rest of our course and beyond. You can continue to have these dialogues and continue to practice your skill at getting better at them. Here's what some alumni have said about how they managed their dialogues and what transpired in them.
I always made the other person feel, which was true, that they were doing something really to help me and that I appreciated that. It wasn't something that they had to do or something that I expected them to do, but really I realized that I was taking time out of their busy schedule to ask a whole bunch of questions that they probably weren't even prepared for. And, just to say, this is what I'm doing, it's part of my class, I would really appreciate it if you could give me a few moments of your time. And then the other thing, too, really helped is that to be as honest as possible. I mean, I made it very clear, and that's why putting in as much as possible really works in terms of getting back out of it. I was very, very clear about my vision, so I knew how much I was willing to share.
These aren't single-point events. I mean, in order for them really to work, this is a commitment that you're making with this other person. And so what I've found is it's very important to have that kind of long-term commitment to it. You're saying, what can I do to better meet your expectations? And therefore, continuously revisit with it. Otherwise, if you just have that conversation once and there's not really a change on your part, or there's not, that ongoing dialogue, then what I have found is that it shows that there's really a lack of interest to really improve the relationship on your side.
So, continue your stakeholder conversations and build on them. If, however, you've not started your stakeholder dialogues, doing preferably at least 6, 2 in each domain, I urge you to do so before you continue with this lecture. You'll get the most out of it this way. And remember, express appreciation to those who are giving you their valuable time and attention by meeting with you to discuss your mutual expectations. Say thanks to them in whatever way makes sense for you. Stakeholder dialogues can be revealing in so many different ways. Often the process of preparing for them, of going over the upcoming conversations in your head and perhaps even role-playing them with others, allows you to think about issues in a different way and to come to certain realizations. For example, Chris, a recent student, talked about a neighbor who often invited him to go out for a beer or to a basketball game to do things together. Chris usually said, "I can't." And it was really for no other reason than the fact that he had a wife and child and wanted to spend time with them instead. He used to think of these reasons as poor excuses, as he called them. In his words, a good excuse is, "I can't, I've got other plans." Whereas his excuse, in his mind, was, "I'd rather sit on my couch with my wife and child than do stuff with you." While thinking through the key stakeholders in his life and preparing for his stakeholder dialogues, however, he realized that he would rather spend time with people when they include his family in activities, rather than just inviting him alone. He realized that this was okay. Rather than feeling as though he was making a bad excuse to not be with his neighbor, he realized that he just needed to acknowledge his priorities and the relative importance of his most important stakeholders. You may have had similar realizations or others that are very different. My point here is that you need not have heard anything new in your stakeholder dialogues to gain insight from them. Some of the best value comes from the ideas you have just thinking about these important relationships. Some people discover in their dialogues clear opportunities to make things better in all parts of their lives. And that's great when that happens. For example, Dan, a finance director at a power generation firm, discovered that his wife, as well as his closest friends, expected him to maintain his physical fitness, both for his own health as well as for the activities that his friends expected to enjoy together. Having a regular exercise routine would thus allow Dan to achieve gains in his home, self, and community domains, in addition to making him a more energetic, healthier employee. Not surprisingly, some people find misaligned expectations through their stakeholder dialogues. Here's what one alumni of our program said about this.
It wasn't until I had that stakeholder dialogue that I knew, and it was with my girlfriend who I was living with at the time, and the consequence is that we broke up. which actually was a good decision as opposed to torturing each other. So, embrace the change.
This is one example of a fairly dramatic change that someone made as a result of our course. And here's another example of another kind of surprise that occurred in another person's dialogues.
One of my stakeholder dialogues was with my son, and my expectation going into that stakeholder dialogue was pretty low. Didn't really know what can I expect from a 16-year-old. And interesting enough, first of all, he was very open. As soon as we started to talk, I explained to him what I'm doing, so I used the class as an excuse, I have to admit. And he was pretty open, and then he said, yeah, Dad, we should talk more on the phone, we should send us emails, we should share more about the day-to-day life, which I thought before was pretty mundane to share with a 16-year-old. But he said, I understand then more where you are, and you understand more where I am. So it was a very positive change to be pretty high today. And we have now plans to go on vacation in summer, so a lot has changed. So I would say there's a good possibility, and it's a surprise how the other side react when they feel you come in to talk really with them about the two of you.
There have been other students who have changed jobs, relocated, and made other major life decisions as a result of insights gained from our course. Most pursue the idea of achieving four-way gains in their lives through smaller, incremental changes. And these are just as meaningful, perhaps even more so, for the main purpose of our course is to learn a new way of thinking about how the parts of your life fit together so that you perform better in all of them, and to gain greater competence and confidence in how you create change as a leader. Change that's sustainable because it's good for you and for the people around you. And it's easier to do that when the changes are small, something we'll talk more about next week. Once you've completed the dialogues and your reflections about them in the assignment questions this week, you're ready to wrap up the part of our course about being whole, about acting with integrity by respecting your most important people. You considered the individuals in your life who really matter to you. You defined your key stakeholders and what they expect of you, as well as what you expect of them. You thought through how these performance expectations affect each other, and you explored the relationships in your life as an interdependent system. You evaluated whether this system has integrity, how the pieces mesh. You then thought about how to use different forms of communication to connect with these stakeholders. And you prepared for and conducted dialogues with them to see what things look like through their eyes. In the next video, we'll move on to the next phase and the third principle: be innovative by acting with creativity.